Okay, so this is my first video that I am making here. This is regarding, the purpose of this channel. I've been told fairly repeatedly that I should probably start a vlog or a podcast or what have you, because the things that I talk about, I'm very passionate about. These are ideas that I've largely come up with on my own through my, decades worth of kind of getting into the subject of the esoteric. So that includes things like the occult, astrology, true purposes of religion. I am not in all, a one-stop shop for every source, but the purpose of this is to get my ideas out there, hopefully connect myself to a community of like-minded individuals who can, help me refine my ideas, and maybe I can give some ideas, for them to glean off of, so that we can probably better understand these elements of our society and our daily lives that I think in the current very materialistic world are largely ignored, and forgotten about. And so in general, this channel will explore daily mundane topics. Some funds. Not everything is going to be based on news, and in fact, I try to stay away from the news as much as possible right now. But in general, I do talk about things like video games and sports, and your relationships, the purpose and meaning in your day-to-day tasks, that pertain to who we are as spiritual individuals. But ultimately, to start with, I think I'm going to talk about probably the most important concept that I don't think anyone in our Western civilization really talk about a great deal, and that would be the concepts of masculinity and femininity. When we talk about those concepts, we talk about it from a modern concept, or context, where we've defined them as traits. And which is very unfortunate, because sometimes those traits actually aren't masculine or feminine, or vice versa, right? But the reason why I focus on this is because everything in our world delineates to whether an action is masculine or feminine, whether or not the purpose of what someone is doing, is a feminine purpose or a masculine purpose. Because in certain areas of life, you need to act in a masculine manner. In certain areas of life, you need to act in a feminine manner. When you don't do that, I do believe that chaos comes up. You have a discord where things start to fall apart. And I think in a lot of different areas in life, we are acting in feminine ways when we should be acting in masculine ways. And and in general, that's actually the the modality that's occurring right now, is that we tend to have a feminine bend. So I talked about this just for a brief moment, but currently the definition of what is masculine or feminine is based on traits. If you're masculine if you have big muscles. You're masculine if you if you have a stiff upper lip. If you don't cry, boys never cry, that type of thing, right? You're feminine if you're submissive. You're feminine if you wear a dress. You're feminine if you focus on being pretty and demure, right? And while some of these things are true, right? There's an essence of masculinity that has the ability to have a stiff upper lip. But that could also be feminine, depending on what the purpose is. You might be feigning that stiff upper lip because it's going to draw you certain attention, or it's going to draw you certain favor. If that's the case, then the expression at that point is no longer masculine. It appears to be, but in reality, it's feminine. The motivation is feminine. So, then what am I talking about? In the ancient context, masculinity and femininity were not description of traits; they were a description of modalities. And the modality of what is, for lack of a better term, it's energy. Where does the force come from? Where does the energy come from? And where is it generated from? Where did it originate? Masculinity is modality that's expressed outward. It's generated within, starts from within, and then it pushes outward. There's a pushing force when it comes down to masculinity. Femininity is the inverse of that. The energy or the focus or the object of desire started outside of itself and it's pulled in, it's attracted, right? You and in general, when we talk about certain languages that are gendered, those gendered languages aren't a structure of the patriarchy meant to keep women in households and forcing everyone to think of things as manly or womanly. Though men and women do have a modality, and we can get into that later, maybe this episode, maybe the next. But no, it's if you pay attention to the languages, it talks about these modalities. Take a pencil for instance. The pencil is considered masculine. What does the pencil do? It doesn't do anything. It's not attracting anything. It's nobody comes to the pencil. Maybe outside of the grab it, but the pencil exists to impress itself on something else, right? It exists to leave a mark. A paper, by the way, a piece of paper, mind you, a piece of paper is feminine. Why? Because that piece of paper, that blank sheet of paper, exists to receive those marks and to receive the, from the pencil or what have you. A pen, however, traditionally is considered to be feminine, but that's because the ink that it receives, is from outside of itself. Remember the pens back in the ancient days were not the ballpoint pens that we have today, though the ballpoint pens are correctly called masculine because the way it leaves its mark comes from within inside of itself, whereas your traditional flowing pen, you have to dip it. It has to receive the ink to be able to act appropriately. A table is considered to be feminine because it exists, it stays there, and that you place things on it. Its purpose is to place something on it. You start to see a bit of the what we're talking about here. You could use a table in a masculine way, which is you take it and you use it as a weapon. You can throw it on someone else, but usually that's a one-time use only. You could probably check a WWE wrestling match at that point. It breaks not too long after that. It's so while you could use something that is feminine in a masculine manner, it takes a lot more energy to do so, and it isn't as effective, and usually it's quite destructive. And this is just a basic example. And if you really want to take a look at those languages, stop looking at it in terms of male versus female. Start to look at it in terms of what is receiving, what is giving. And you'll very often, more often than not, if not very highly, you'll see that the languages gender certain objects, in fact most objects, based on that that assumption. So where did we go wrong? Because even when I was in a French course in college, we took a French civilization course in college. We knew about whether or not an object was masculine, feminine, but only in the sense that it was conveyed to us to be that way. This nuance wasn't in our lesson plan in a college course, right? Like you would have thought that when talking about the the modalities in a French language course it'd be understood, but it wasn't really, and we just the teacher actually explained it to us as a sort of peculiarity, something that it was very weird but it's just the way they do things. And this is part of the reason why I'm talking about this, because when you start to recognize that these modalities, have a very real, very actual, tangible definition that you can start to, you don't look at it in terms of male or female. You start to look at it as who's giving, who's receiving, and why. You begin to understand some of the motivations that go into some actions and whether or not it's appropriate. In this channel, I'll be talking about probably a great deal. You'll hear a lot of me from the concept of astrology. Astrology is something that is referenced in practically all religions. The ancients understood the world from this tool. It was a tool, not necessarily something for divination, though divination can occur from using it. And and specifically, you could get a thorough understanding of your areas of life that exists from the 12 signs and the 12 houses that are associated with that. It's all encompassing. There is nothing in life that cannot be placed within these signs. There is no area in life that is not addressed within astrology. And the ancients were obsessed in using it. Religions have found it contentious at times, but even the venerated Christianity, was very well aware of astrological symbols. There was such books such as Christian astrology that was widely read, in the I believe the 18th century. And there are many of the founding fathers of the United States practiced astrology. I do, this channel, because it's esoteric in base, will constantly talk about the themes in astrology. When I talk about sports, you're usually going to find some lessons, gleaning from these figures. I prefer sports because even though it's controlled theater, what you see is largely in line with the types of lessons that each of these players have to go through. And when they achieve in understanding these lessons and practicing them and putting them to play on the field, you see them succeed. They win. And part of the reason why we watch these events is because we are interested, whether we know it or not, we are interested in watching that human drama play out, because there's lessons for us to learn when we watch, other people compete and try to overcome themselves. What's the biggest things that we love in sports is the in Rocky IV, it's the you against you, right? It's the paradox that drives us all, right? If you remember that movie's lyrics from one of the montages. But in this channel, even in terms of when we talk astrology, I'm not a practicing astrologer. I'm not as good as many of my astrology friends, although I don't have many of them. I wish I had more. But I even notice within the astrological community, the concepts of masculine and feminine are very heavily glossed over. They're glossed over in a way that I find a bit bothersome, because if they would understand, not understand it better, if they pay more mind to it, they might actually interpret certain events within their lives or in the world or entirely a bit differently. But that's also because I do believe there's a strong feminine influence in the world right now, and that has people believing what they want to believe. And so, I'll be able to go into that in future episodes, because some people might say, what do you mean, deceit? Well, you'll find that as I, develop this series, and, I don't know if it's going to happen on a day-to-day basis, but there is in world events today, and even within ourselves, when we are not aware of these definitions, you to actually take away what is actually one of the higher masculine components. This is something that's found in Sagittarius. It's a masculine sign, that's pertained to the higher mind. Probably, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm probably gonna do a series on it, because I think it makes sense, just the general development of masculinity and femininity through the signs, and just as a way of kind of conveying how these energies tend to work. But this is just a short little introduction as to what this channel aims to be. Like I said, I'm not an expert. These are my ideas that I've been crafting over many, many years, through a lot of discussions, both within my own head and periodically with some real sounding great individuals who, through their behest, I've started on this little venture. So I greatly look forward to developing this series, developing this channel. Obviously, some people might say, don't quit your J job. I don't plan on doing that. But I feel very strongly that this is something that I'm called to do. So with that, I'll leave it as it is right now. 15 minutes is pretty good. We'll see you in the next one.